Okay, so the Terence Crawford vs Israel Madrimov card just took place, and we just saw two big heavyweight fights on the undercard in Martin Bacoli vs Jared Anderson and Jarrell Miller vs Andy Ruiz. So yeah, both big babies on the card, of course, that being Jared Anderson and Jarrell Miller. And that was actually a big story on Fight Week, the tension between the two men that shared the nickname, rather than the tension between them and their respective opponents. And this, of course, came to a boil at the press conference, at which Jarrell Miller absolutely cooked Jared Anderson. Anderson did not have much at all to say back to Miller, and Crybaby Anderson was, of course, a mean line from Miller considering the context. Jared Anderson had a sort of, I don't need to talk too much sort of approach. So, it more so appeared that he was just taking the verbal onslaught. But if you take that approach, then, as long as you prove yourself on the night, then, the words at the presser don't count, right? But worst case scenario for Jared Anderson, of course, is if he loses to Bacoli badly and Jarrell Miller goes on to beat Andy Ruiz, right? Well, that sort of is actually what happened, but obviously Jarrell Miller vs Andy Ruiz was officially scored as a draw. But if both Jared Anderson and Jarrell Miller were to win, or even both to lose, a fight against each other would have made sense, to find out who the real big baby is. Or even if Anderson won and Miller lost, it still would have made sense, because Jarrell Miller can, of course, sell himself coming off of a loss, which we've just seen. And it could have, of course, been a chance for Jared Anderson to shut Jarrell Miller up. But yeah, results-wise, it couldn't have been much a worse night for Jared Anderson. So taking a look at how Jared Anderson and Martin Bacoli played out, of course, Bacoli actually knocked him down in the first round. Not to say that it wasn't a good start from Anderson, so obviously early in the round, well, Bacoli did jump on him early, but other than that, for most of the first round, Bacoli was sort of standing static. Obviously, he was 30 pounds heavier, so he was sort of standing still, like, as a sort of big threat, not giving too much for Anderson to read. But Anderson was doing the right thing in there, jabbing him, moving around, throwing some straight lefts to the body, obviously out of the southpaw stance. Obviously, Anderson is a switch hitter, and they're just being quick and outworking Bacoli, who's obviously the big sort of static guy, big 280-pound guy. But Jared Anderson got a bit too excited, lunging in for a body shot at the end of the round. Caught a shot from Bacoli, obviously a nice uppercut, followed up by some more shots, and Bacoli was able to put Anderson down at the end of the first round. So that's a 10-8 round lost for Anderson in the first round. So second round, Jared Anderson just must have thought, let me just start exchanging with this guy instead of fighting tit for tat after getting caught, and getting knocked down. So he was mostly orthodox this round. I guess that's the stance he's more comfortable, trading out of. So just some really good exchanges in this round, but Bacoli's the one clipping Anderson more and bopping his head back with some clean shots to the head. Anderson's landed some shots of his own. But yeah, obviously Anderson just decided to initiate these exchanges. But when they were in close quarters, Bacoli was completely outlanding him. And then going into the third round, we saw the same sort of thing. Good heart from Anderson being displayed, but Bacoli's shots just looked way harder. Of course, the head of Anderson being constantly rocked back from those Bacoli shots. We did see Anderson trying to outwork him, trying to be the more active one, moving around. He was taking some shots well. He was landing some body shots on Bacoli, which, to be honest, didn't really seem to affect Bacoli too much. So it continues to be a spirited effort from Anderson, but the story remains that Bacoli seems a stronger puncher, and showing that it's not really that much of a good idea for Anderson to be engaging in these exchanges. But it was definitely entertaining, so I won't complain, because I was definitely entertained by this fight, and it was sort of making me root for Anderson. Obviously, Bacoli's a fighter fighting out of Britain, so I'd naturally root for him. But spirited effort from Anderson, throughout round 2 and 3, and then round 4 we saw again not much changed, and we actually saw a point in the middle of the round where Anderson was in southpaw, and Bacoli literally just started teeing off of right hands, and Anderson not really showing any sort of adjustment to these right hands. But still a good effort from Anderson in the fourth. But yeah, all four of the first 4 rounds all go to Bacoli, of course, the first being a 10-8 again. And then round 5, Anderson did show a decent chin to this point, but I think this is when his chin just had enough, and his punch resistance was just decreased by this point in the fight. So yeah, a clean knockdown with a left uppercut. He seemed a bit of a sucker for an uppercut in that fight all round, and fair play to him for getting up. It looked like he fell out of the ring. It looked like quite a bad knockdown, but he got up. Obviously, Bacoli was able to step on the gas, get him hurt again, knock him down again. I want to say fair play to Anderson though, because after the second knockdown, I thought that he came back too. He got up. Fair play for him to getting up twice. But the way he looked at the referee, I thought he was going to do something to indicate to the referee that he couldn't really continue and sort of subtly quit. When people do that, but he actually came to respond to the referee well. And then obviously after that, he was stopped on the feet. So yeah, Martin Bacoli had defeated Jared Anderson, which I would say is not an upset defeat at all. Not an upset defeat. So let me just quickly go on a tangent about the betting. So I'm not promoting betting here, but I'm just using the odds to sort of indicate, the notions about the fights going in. So, some live dogs on this card, and Boli was definitely one of them. Jarrell Anderson hasn't really fought anyone to prove. He had that test against Charles Martin, which wasn't the best performance anyway. But Boli is a huge step up, and don't see why Boli was such an underdog, to be honest.
We saw the heavy underdog Rayo Valenzuela, outpoint Isaac Pitbull Cruz, which some boxing hardcores might not be too surprised at. And obviously the performances, Majumov lost, and obviously Miller drew with Ruiz, but they were both underdogs, and people were probably surprised by how well they performed. So yeah, a night of the underdogs, sort of. But one of the other things, the reason why I brought up the odds, one of the things that confused me, along with Boli being the underdog, was obviously David Morrell was a 1-40 favourite on the particular betting app I looked at, which is, rightly so heavy favourite. But, he was way more like tipped to win by stoppage. He was 1-9 by stoppage and 6-1 on points, which means that he's basically, everyone thinks that, Morrell's going to knock this guy out at light heavyweight, in his light heavyweight debut. But look what we just saw with Benavidez. He's meant to be known as a really hard hitter, much like Morrell, at 168. So, why would everyone expect him to get the knockout so easily at 175? I know the guy who Morrell fought has been stopped before, but, he's been stopped by Artur Beterbiev. That's the only man he's been stopped by. Much like David Benavidez, he just fought Gvozdyk. Gvozdyk took, Benavidez the distance, and the only man he'd been stopped by is Beterbiev. So, just because someone's been stopped by Beterbiev doesn't mean they're going to be stopped by a 168er, by a super middleweight. So, yeah, we just saw Benavidez being taken a distance. So the fact Morrell was taking a distance, not surprised at all. So yeah, that whole thing, along with Boli being an underdog, was quite surprising for me. Not an upset at all, really, Boli winning.
This was Anderson's, as I say, biggest step up by far. I know we did fight a former world champion, but that's Charles Martin of all former world champions. Let's just say that. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Boli got the win.
Obviously, Boli, a man of only one loss. That loss was to Michael Hunter,
who actually did come in the ring after the fight. And they spoke about a rematch, which I'd love to see. I remember back when Hunter stopped Boli late on in the fight, that TKO win. That was actually, I remember watching that on Channel 5. That was like 6 years ago now. So that rematch would be cool. See if Boli could beat his second American in a row. And very good fight, very fun fight. One-sided, but still fun. Anderson still made it fun, spirited effort. So yeah.
It sounds more like I was, going into detail about Anderson losing rather than Boli winning. But that speaks to the same reason why maybe Anderson was the favourite, because he's the most storied fighter. The whole American thing I will touch on. Obviously the card was in America. He's the next best American heavyweight. To me, it just takes a look at the resume. To see Boli as the favourite, but maybe I'm just seeing that because I know more about the UK fighter. But I'm quickly going to touch on the Jarrell Miller versus Andy Ruiz draw, and then I'll go into detail about how significant Jarrell Anderson's loss is.
So of course, a controversial draw, Jarrell Miller versus Andy Ruiz. Let's be honest. We all thought Jarrell Miller won. That's the narrative after the fight. So this is my sort of immediate reaction after the whole card, after the Crawford fight. I haven't got a chance to rewatch any of the rounds or even the highlights yet. Just to quickly tell you guys that my scorecard, I gave 1, 2, 3, 4 to Ruiz actually. And then I gave 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 all to Miller, which means I had it 116, 112 to Miller, of course. So yeah, round 4. So I did give Ruiz the first 4 rounds. The first 4 rounds were competitive, but Ruiz was just outlanding him in every round. Even like Miller did get like a nice big flurry, and where he looked like he sort of hurt Ruiz a bit in the second round. There were some good exchanges, like both men going back and forth with body shots in round 3. Round 4, Miller was pressuring him, making Ruiz look uncomfortable on the back foot. But all the first 4 rounds, Ruiz, because Ruiz was, outlanding him noticeably, just landing more punches. And then obviously round 5, the pressure started to pay off more from Miller. Great body work, looked to slow Ruiz down a bit. And some big shots at the very end of the round. Round 6 as well, these good body shot exchanges in the inside, Miller getting the better of them. And, getting in some good shots at the end of the round again in round 6. And then round 7, just Miller completely outworking him. Ruiz actually looking noticeably tired, like at this point. That pressure paying off. Round 8 is one where I think even round could go either way. I did give this round to Miller though, still taking that round for me. Round 9, definite Miller round, big pressure, just staying on Ruiz, sticking it on him with the body shots again. And, definitely bothering Ruiz with some shots upstairs as well. And yeah, round 10, another Miller round, as I said. Some nice combinations, just outlanding them. Some shots come back from Ruiz. Miller took them well for the most part. Obviously, Ruiz was taking the shots well himself. Actually, round 11 was a bit on the closer side. But yeah, Miller's still outworking him. And yeah, Ruiz doesn't look so effective on the back foot. I don't think his punches are that effective on the back foot. So even though maybe it's like even amount of punches landed, Miller just coming forward looking better. And then round 12 is another round where people make a case for Ruiz winning. But yeah, I say Miller is the round. Good exchanges, but I say Miller maybe just about got the better of them. Round 8 and 12 are the two rounds which I think people are saying can go either way. I haven't heard what that many people have to say about it to this point. But if you can make a case for Andy Ruiz winning round 8 and 12, then I guess it is a draw. So I guess from that perspective, the only real way to make a definitive decision on who should have won is to watch round 8 and 12 back. And yeah, if you give one of them, even if you just give one of those round 8 or 12 to Miller, then you've got Miller winning. But yeah, let me know how you guys scored the fight. If there was any other rounds other than 8 and 12 that you scored, other than what the whole narrative is.
But yeah, just to know, Andy Ruiz actually broke his hand in this fight. But a super competitive and a very good fight either way. And a better version of Miller than we saw in the Dubois fight. I guess that weight loss and that training with Jarrell and Bozy Ennis in Philadelphia made quite the difference for Miller in this fight. But in the intro, I referenced the whole real big baby thing and the potential Jarrell Miller vs Jared Anderson fight. But this pair of results had a whole different level of significance, outside of that. So of course, a few weeks back, I put out a video where I calculated how badly America fell off in the heavyweight division in reaction to Deontay Wilder losing to Zhilei Zhang. And towards the end of that video, I spoke about how Jared Anderson is tipped as the next great American hope in the heavyweight division. But I was saying how the odds of him going on to be champ are not that great. So this of course pertains to the whole story of all the pressure being on Jared Anderson's back. People expect him to save the USA status in the biggest division in boxing. As of course that nation dominated the division for over a century, then completely fell off come the 2000s, as my calculations proved. Not that people didn't know that already, but it was just fun to quantify it all. So yeah, that's relevant to Anderson because all of that history is mounted as pressure on his back, also coming along with the pressures of his personal life. Of course, some care about boxers' personal life more than others, but whatever way you look at it, the whole thing about the pressure being on Jared is intriguing. So the supposed next great American heavyweight losing in that fashion is a big blow to their hopes in the division, of course. Not to say that he's done for. Well, the man did contemplate retirement at this young age, but in the post-fight interview for this fight, he did express his desires to fight on. And he is only young and still has a lot of time to come back. And some would say that this step up in competition against Boli did come too soon. But all in all, the tipped next great American heavyweight lost to, a man who according to the ring is the 4th best heavyweight fighter out of Britain. But I mean, there are other undefeated fighters in Britain other than Boli that, would arguably beat Boli. So yeah, that whole point I was sort of proving in that, America falling off in the heavyweight division thing. Again, Jared Anderson's not done for, but it's kind of getting proved right as we go along. As an individual, I'm not a hater. I'm definitely not hating on Jared Anderson. Interesting story. If he's coming up against a UK fighter in the future for a world title, obviously I'm going to root for, the UK fighter, being from the UK myself. But, I would like to see him try and bounce back. And, I'm definitely not saying he's done for at all. No. But yeah, just a big blow for America in the heavyweight division, and yeah, that whole narrative of them falling off continues to prove right. So the result of Jarrell Miller vs Andy Ruiz actually also plays into the whole narrative I'm talking about of America falling off in the heavyweight division. So obviously Andy Ruiz, let's just say he is American. Obviously he's Mexican ethnicity, but he was born in the USA. His pro fights are all in the USA. He beat AJ for the belts there. The American fans were happy because the belts were back there for a bit. So, he's been very, inactive since losing to AJ in their rematch. Obviously fighting Chris Arreola and Luis Ortiz, which are both decent opponents considering how long of a layoff he was coming off in both of those occasions. And, he was coming off of a even bigger layoff this time against Jarrell Miller. So people are seeing if Andrew Ruiz can come back and, do some damage and see if he still had it. But obviously Jarrell Miller definitely got the better of him in that fight. A lot of people are saying he won, rightly so, that Jarrell Miller won. So it shows that Andy Ruiz might not be much of a contender. Let's more. Obviously, I want to more so give credit to Miller than say Ruiz didn't do well. But if you want to look at it results wise, obviously I know Miller is a better version of himself than when he fought Dubois. But if you want to look at it results wise, Dubois stopped Miller, and then Miller and Ruiz fought to a draw in a very competitive fight, which Miller got the better of him. Which from that lens, if you want to look at it through that results lens, sort of writes Ruiz off a bit and just sort of proves how the UK is a cut above. So yeah, there's that way of looking at things. And if you want to look at it another way, in terms of who the sort of best American heavyweights are, well, Jarrell Miller, Andy Ruiz, and Jarrell Anderson are probably three of the best American heavyweights now. Arguably the three best. Obviously Michael Hunter's up there, but if you look at his recent fights and stuff, it's arguable. So yeah, so three of the best American heavyweights on the same card, two of them fighting each other, and hear the madness, none of them won. Three of them fighting on the same card, two of them fighting each other, and none of them won. So yeah, it's mad how it all sort of leads into the thing I was saying. Not to double down on it too much though, but yeah, just going back to the whole Miller and Anderson rivalry. I don't know how relevant that rivalry is going to be after this, especially that I do reckon Miller and Ruiz are going to have a rematch, because it was a draw and it was a good fight, so it makes sense. So yeah, but obviously bragging rights wise, they're beefing before the fight. Obviously Miller definitely arguably won, Anderson lost, so Miller had the better night, and for now Miller is the real big baby over Jarrell Anderson. But yeah, in terms of their country, again, not a good night in the heavyweight division, of course. And just to link it back to the video I made again about America falling off in the heavyweight division. So obviously we saw them fall off in the 2000s, and I'm not saying that we thought that Jarrell Anderson was going to be a great, the likes of Ali, Tyson, Holyfield, all of these guys, all of the former great American champions, when it was the sort of prime, the better heavyweight eras. But just to make this comparison, Jarrell Anderson obviously now taking a loss before he's ever challenged for a world title. All the great American heavyweight champions of the past you can think of, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Larry Holmes, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, all of those guys won the world title when they were undefeated. You know what I mean? So just proves that he won't go on to be that level of greatness. Whereas if you look at the 2000s now, you look at Chris Bird, John Ruiz, the American champions in the era where the heavyweight division wasn't as good, and also when America didn't have that much dominance. Those champions took a loss before winning the world title. So it sort of proves that if he does go on to be a world champion, he'll be more of that ilk, more of the John Ruiz, the Chris Bird, who are good fighters, but he'd be more of that ilk. They'll already have a loss, pick up a belt, be more of a belt holder, winning a vacant title, and possibly going to make some defenses, but not going to be one of the sort of greatest of all time type heavyweights. So not that it wouldn't be a great story if Jarrell Anderson was to come back from this loss and go on to win a world title, but yeah, he will, be all time wise, he won't be one of the the great heavyweights if he does go on to do good things. If we're going by history.
But yeah, you guys let me know in the comments what you think about all of that and what you think about the whole card in general. But I just find it really interesting that we had two big heavyweight fights that were so interlinked on the same card, back to back. I felt like that was the sort of co-main and main. I'm obviously watching in the UK, so by the time the Crawford fight, by the time Crawford's hand was raised, it was literally 7:15 in the morning, and I'm recording this straight afterwards, so you can only imagine what time of the morning it is now. Great card all round. I'm saying that two heavyweight fights could have been the main and the co-main, just to speak to how stacked the card was, and then obviously we had a good fight afterwards with Pitbull Cruz, and then obviously the main event of Crawford Madrimov. We had Andy Cruz, David Morrell, both fighting earlier in the night. So, very stacked card, good card. Obviously ended with some would say controversial, a controversial fight with Crawford and Madrimov, where Crawford got the decision. You heard Eddie Hearn going on about how bad the 116, 112 was. Now, I'm going to come clean. I didn't score that fight, so I'm not going to say anything about who won. But that main event, it was a It was a good competitive fight. I mean, it was one of those fights. It started off slow, sort of both guys trying to get the tactical read of each other, but it's definitely one of those fights that picked up as it went along. And obviously Crawford got the win to become a 4-weight world champion. As I said, I didn't score it, so I'm not gonna say who I think won, because I can't, unless I've scored it round for round. But Eddie Hearn, saying 116, 112 is crazy, but you could give it to Crawford. Well, if you could give it to Crawford, that means you give it 115, 113 at least. So it's a 1 round difference. So I think Eddie Hearn's going a bit wild there, with his rants. But obviously Madrimov is a fighter, he's a Matchroom representative, so you can call him Matrimov, yeah. But obviously, again, let me know in the comments what you thought about Crawford at 54. But yeah, I just don't think that size was a massive reason that the fight was competitive, because people thought if Madrimov was competitive, that would be the reason. But it's just the timing his punches as well and stuff. Not to say that him being a naturally heavier fighter, that his punches wouldn't do more damage and stuff. But you look at a Lomachenko, like when he's like a cut above his opponents in skill at 135, but the fights are competitive because of his size disadvantage. This definitely didn't look like one of those fights. So imagine if actually fought well in there. It wasn't the size thing. It wasn't like bullying him up or like anything like that with his weight. So very interesting. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. But yeah, as I said, I didn't score the fight. I'll be honest. It was very late. I was watching fights for a very long time by that point. I was actually watching the UFC, which was in Abu Dhabi, so the prelims. I was watching the prelims from about 6 p.m, so we're talking over 12 hours straight of watching fights. So I was a bit cooked by that point. Obviously, I'm cooked right now. So yeah. And obviously, it's a stacked card, so it was worth staying up for. But I do find it a bit mad how it was pay-per-view here in the UK. Obviously, pay-per-view won't be card, but the whole thing is that it's like, just going back to the UFC as well on TNT Sports, these massive cards, the reason they're not pay-per-view, they're a pay-per-view card, but the reason they're not pay-per-view in the UK is because if you're going to be up, you have to stay up till 6:30 or 7 in the morning to watch them. It's not fair to also charge for it. So yeah, £25 on TNT Sports box office is what it is. You have to pay the 25. I obviously paid that £25. I didn't like watch the whole card on an illegal stream. That was Gara. That was a nice little 480p that only cut out twice in the whole card. Definitely not. Obviously, I paid for it, right? But yeah, just let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments what you think about the whole card. And of course, you have been listening to O.M.E Boxing.